This is the Beige and the Bold, and today we are watching Silicon Avatar. I'm Van Velding, and I watched this episode when it originally aired.
And I'm Derek. This is my first time watching this episode.
You ready?
Yep.
And 3, 2, 1, engage.
Nerds!
Yeah, it's set up a nice little colony here doing surveying.
It is kind of nice though. Like they're all like it's like you expect like Jane Goodall just like right off camera, like, and this is the nerds in their natural habitat. They're establishing a colony in which to procreate more nerddom.
Yeah, and I assume that there's some base camp that's just off screen, and that this is just like the Eastern Platte that they're surveying today because they've been here for like what, a month.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. They don't really say. No, that's he's talking about how many colonies. But one of the things that we do know that's going on is that Riker's looking to give her the business.
Yeah,
and I mean that he only ever does that smile, like that smile looking down at a person when he's looking to give her the D.
Yeah, no, that's a fairly one of the Riker grins. I feel like we're speed running the Riker arc. And the Riker arc is, he meets a lady, he falls in love with the lady reciprocates somewhat, lady dies, Riker feel bad. And I feel like there's a half button press in just how quickly we get through it this time.
Yeah, and like so here it is. This is where he's like, she's even doing like the lip bite. Like, well, she's about to start doing the lip bite. When she starts looking down at her thing and she mentions something about dessert. She does like a lip bite thing, and so like she's like turning it on as well. Like she's like, "Hey, yeah, you here she goes, there she is," and so it's like we know that she's super interested in Riker, and then he's like, "Yeah, my favorite part of dinner." Like they're kind of talking dirty out in the open, right?
Yeah. Well, they're using desserts as an entendre so that you, the viewer, will know he wants to have heterosexual sex with her.
Yeah, and then here, and then I can imagine in his mind, it's like, here comes Captain Buzzkill talking about Data and the Doctor, but here comes the real Buzzkill.
So it's Lieutenant Commander Buzzkill. The Crystalline Entity is CGI and it's been remastered here.
Is this?
Yeah.
See, this is interesting. Like go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say there's no ships on the surface, no long range scanners, no early warning system. No communications net. Like, they're just butt hanging out here. And here comes the Crystalline Entity to be like, yeah, that was a terrible idea. How did the Huznok ever destroy Kevin Uxbridge's colony? I guess they just wanted to, and then it happened. Like, there's no safeguards of these things. It's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, I was... What was interesting to me was, he gets a serious face, which, okay, fine, like, danger is imminent. But he tells Data, like, hey, where can we go? And Data's like, oh, man, a cave. And he's like, all right, we've seen this before. We got to move. And then I'm hooked. Like, I'm like, yeah. Oh, all right. Interesting. I've never seen this before. This looks pretty neat. But it turns out, oh, no, we can just kill it. It's fine. That's part of what bothers me, because I guess part of me was really hoping that this was an episode where, Starfleet kind of faces their own mortality in a sense, what they can and can't handle, and how much they still have to grow and learn and that sort of thing.
I was going to say that the Borg were about that, but no, we killed the Borg like 2 years ago.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, we
blew up a few Borg, but yeah.
A lot of sci-fi is very human-centric, where it's just humans can always overcome because we're just plucky and interesting and blah, blah, blah. But sometimes reality doesn't care. Things are big and destructive and don't necessarily care what humans are doing.
In fiction, there is a conflict, especially in television shows, between... okay, well, it's realistic. Okay, it's also escapism. Scrubs had an interesting episode about that, where I think it's like My Life in Four Colors or something, where one of their patients is like a Hollywood producer of all their favorite shows or whatever, and they're like, oh, what if our life was like that? And then it shows Scrubs, in like a standard sitcom milieu with the brighter lighting.
Yeah, I think I remember that
the broader characters. It was a good episode. And there's a bunch of dudes getting wasted.
This was pretty evocative. I kind of liked how simple this is of like energy turns everything to sand. Like, okay, it doesn't blow it up, but I mean, don't want to be sand, so better run.
You absolutely don't. This thing's carbon emissions are awful. But yeah. So, it's a credible threat, and I think it actually does take this thing hours to scrub the planet of life, which, you do the math on how quick that ray is. Darn it.
My classic old folk fall. Like, I did have to practice that. That literally happened. I was wondering how this was going to happen, where he's, like, already saving someone, and no one else can help this old guy.
Will, come over here and watch me die.
Will, we were going to have sex. I need your help.
And Will's like, Data, I know you're carrying 3 children. Carry this 4th child. And Data's like juggling them, and he throws 3 of them up, runs over, grabs the other one, comes back, incorporates it into the child juggling.
He's moving at like 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Just picking up all these kids and juggling them as he's rolling by.
Or he's like, midway through, he's just throwing people into the cave.
Yeah. And then also catching them.
I'm just saying, they have like a half dozen tiny ships in this thing. One shuttlecraft in orbit would have been like, oh, dudes, it's bad. Come here.
Or like a buoy. Or like a buoy. You don't even have to man the thing. Just, remember all those science probes you just shoot out willy-nilly? Just one of those. That just has this loop, like it's powered by the sun, and it has a looping message saying, hey, here be dragons. Don't come here.
I just, like, we've seen this multiple times before. Like, whenever Beta Z doesn't have any space police. Like, the planet of Beta Z where people live and are from.
Right, and that's what's interesting about this, is that survival, like, when you talk about colonists, survival is kind of like this marriage of creation and destruction, right? Like, or like creation and danger, I would say. Like, you want to create this community, but you're also afraid of things. I thought this was kind of weird that they like straight up sealed off the entrance. I thought that the cave would have been enough.
I know, right? It's like, are you afraid the Crystalline Entity is going to come in? You think it's going to bank shot like on a snooker table? Like, put one leg up on the table and try to, like, bullseye into the cave?
Right.
Like an anteater?
Because this would be equivalent to, like, they make a mention of, like, sperm whales later on. Like, this would be equivalent of, like, a sperm whale, like, running, I don't know, like, swimming miles for, like, what do we got, 30 cuttlefish?
Yeah, I think it's just like, if there's a Coke bottle with some krill inside, and the sperm whale's like, oh, I gotta get them out.
It's like, no, I can't leave. Like, sperm whale, you're dying. Like, no. The last ones are the best ones.
But whatever, they gotta use their phasers to make a thing explode to fight the bad guy.
Yeah, and like the other thing too is that it seems like that was a bad idea. Like, just making this a huge heat source inside of a cave. Like, oh, cool. So like that's going to create who knows what kind of vapor in a closed space that we're running out of oxygen in. All right. I mean, who knows what those materials are? But you definitely heated them up to the point where some of them are gaseous now.
I mean, that's possible. It's going to emit heat. That's not healthy.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know how long that rock's going to glow for.
Yeah, like, whatever. I'm totally fine with, like, okay, like the small rock thing. Like, yeah, cool. Like, but I mean, that would, like, both him and Data, like, heated up just a section of the wall. Never mind the fact that when you do that, it's, like, essentially making part of the wall weaker, and that could have caused a cave-in. So, I mean, some things here that don't track right off the bat.
It reminds us that we're doing science fiction-y stuff, as if the space laser wasn't good enough.
Yeah, right.
But it would have been kind of hilarious if Riker and Data had been like, all right, let's get some light in here, and they readjust their phasers, and then Data walks like to the edge of the set and then off the set, and he turns on like some lighting rigs, and he walks back, and he's like, thank you, Data, well done.
Yeah. And so, like, if I was paying attention to Netflix, like a little card, I know that the person that was in the card, I haven't seen them yet, and it doesn't look like they were in a cave. So I'm roughly sure that these people are going to get out of the cave, right? So we're speed running a few things. Like, this is a survival situation. You know, Riker already lost like the chick that he wanted to have sex with. I thought that person right there on screen was like having birth. Like, why is she like short breathing like that? I was like, oh man, this is about to get a lot worse.
Yeah. Well, trust me, an unexpected baby delivery can make any situation worse.
Yeah. I would imagine.
So yeah, I hate that we're deprived of a Riker decision here.
Right.
It was like, okay, all right, Renegade or Paragon, Riker. You know, you gotta leave us in here to maybe die of suffocation, or gamble and we go outside and maybe the Crystalline Entity eats us.
Right. And like, we didn't get to see the whole, we don't know how much air there is in here. And it's like, so there was no exploration. Like, there was no like, hey, let's answer that question. Like, will there be air or not air? And then that way we would have known, like, okay, there isn't enough air. So that's why we're seeing all these people. We kind of get explanation. I mean, we do get explanation after the fact, but it's like,
Well, when they seal the cavern, they talk about the air supply. That's a known threat of what they've done.
Yeah, well, they didn't know. Because even Riker said, like, oh, there may be a ventilation source somewhere. But it doesn't matter, because Worf saves the day.
I mean, and again, if Riker had made that decision, and they're like, okay, that's consequential, but we'll do it, and the option would have had to have been, because of the way stories are, that they go outside.
Well, you mean, you can't just open the door and Worf's at the door, because then you're going to hit him. That's not nice.
It'd be hilarious. He just dodges.
Yeah. Like, Worf is about to punch a rock and it gets really hot and, like, his hand burns.
So anyway, but whatever, we're resolved. Riker makes no decisions. But he is super angry at the Crystalline Entity. Guys, we have spent 3 scenes setting up how he liked the girl because they were gonna have some sex. I mean, and then she dead.
Yeah, I mean, we even saw Macduff like, hey man, you know, this is kind of a little overboard, don't you think? And he was just so mad. Still,
I mean, that's Macduff.
Classic,
you know,
Macduff.
Mr. Pump the Brakes.
Right, exactly. Cautious Macduff.
Yeah, he sucks. So, yeah, and we get a good matte painting for a giant canyon that wasn't there before.
Yeah, so do we know if the whole planet is just silica now? Or is it just like...
I mean, look at our external, man. Look at that planet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
That planet has been properly space buggered. It's not...
Yeah.
Not so...
But, I mean, this is kind of interesting. So we have, like, this threat that just feels so large, and then apparently we have a scientist that is a Crystalline Entity killer. I mean, a researcher.
Yeah. I just... it's great that, like, there's no one in the psychology department of the Federation is like, so why does she study the... Oh, yeah, there we go. Here we are. Take a big sigh, everybody.
Yeah. Oh,
it's going to be a racism against Data episode.
Yeah, the episode really is just like, hey, let's be mean to Data and then put him in comfortable situations that he's on paper not able to handle. Like, doesn't have the tools to handle.
I feel like Chief O'Brien should be behind the transporter and he's like, and there's a big placard and he turns it back to 0 days since, like, ridiculous Data nonsense.
Yeah.
So
and I mean, like there's a good chance that after the Federation is dust, Data's the last man standing. Like, he's the only record of Starfleet. Yeah,
we kind of talk about that, and like that's an interesting one because they're a little inconsistent with it. Yeah. I just feel like in a moment here, Riker's going to be all the Crystalline Entity, and then Dr. Marlo's going to reach over and go, oh no, I've got that.
No.
The Crystalline Entity.
No. Oh, if you're going to try to take some of my screen time on Crystalline Entity hate, I got that market cornered, power. You need to pump your brakes.
And it's like, did the writers forget that Riker didn't have a degree in space geology? Is that what it was? And they're like, all right, so Riker's going to get angry and he's going to use his degree in space geology to kill the Crystalline Entity and jeopardize his career.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have a degree in space geology. Oh, let's make an entirely new character then.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we didn't even know, like, I mean, to their credit, they didn't pull the whole, like, oh, Data knows everything. But they kind of did. They're like, oh, listen, Data knows, like, the most on the ship, which is really just more than anyone.
Yeah.
The ship could be Starfleet, but we're not going to say that because we have another scientist here. We don't want to make her feel inadequate.
Yeah. So, whatever.
Yeah.
And here we get the implicit racism becomes the overt racism.
Yeah, there it is.
Because, like, my stupid jacket says that you and Data will go together. You can have all the extras you want in this mission, but you gotta take Data.
Right.
She's also effectively filling us in on season 1.
Yeah. Yeah, and we get a little more about why that is, but it's still... it is kind of unreasonable, actually, that you can't work with others. If the counselor should definitely peg that you're on a revenge kick and gave you some counseling, like almost immediately after your son died. And then, maybe you moved on with your life,
I sense, Captain, that she's working at about 2.3 Ahabs.
Yeah, she's like, I would have loved this. Is like, so what do you think, counselor? Like, oh, she's going to kill that entity.
Yeah, she's like, you don't need an empath to know what she's thinking. And he's like, actually, counselor, I've been meaning to talk with you about that.
I think there may be other opportunities on different ships that you'd find suitable.
Look, it's an old word, but a powerful one. Have you heard of redundancy? I just...
Yeah, and it's really frustrating when you see that, because you look at all of her powers, and she should have just as much utility as Data has, but they just don't write her those lines at all.
I feel like she said the quiet part out loud, and then Troy pipes up from a corner. You mean that I'm not incredibly useful? And you're like, too late, Troy.
That would have been funny if just like they had that argument where it's like, oh yeah, no, she wants to kill the entity, and it's like, are you sure? He's like, pretty sure, empath and all. And he's like, oh well, let's see how this pans out. And then at the very end, he's like, told you.
Or she's like, yeah, I just watched Riker's storyline die in front of us, so someone's got to do something in this episode.
Someone's got to pick up those pieces.
It's not going to be Will. And Will's like, oh, you don't have to say it out loud.
Hey, listen, Imzadi, you need to just play to your strengths, all right?
Riker's going to get a plus someday. And he runs out and slams the door somehow.
Yeah, he's always like this. Just let him get his dick wet and he'll be fine.
Set doors to dramatic. No one understands me. You're a dick with a beard, Riker. Everyone understands me.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. And like it is kind of goofy that that whole storyline is goofy, and it culminates in the most ridiculous way. And then it just we'll get to that, I guess. This is kind of somewhat interesting because they don't do a great job of it, but I think what they're trying to do here is that even though she hates Data, like she hates the Crystalline Entity more. And so she's just kind of like talking through the problem.
Yeah, and they're furthering the mystery that we have, and we're also getting some background on her, that everybody on Omicron Theta died, and I don't know if this is the scene where we learn about her son.
No, it's later. But
I'm just going to say, these Kelvinite and Fistrium deposits go deep. This Fistrium, man, you would not believe how deep the Fistrium goes. Not quite to the planet's core, but deep enough. Deep enough.
Substrata.
That's my Fistrium joke.
Yeah, and so what this essentially does is that like we get like this kind of vitriol from her. And she's like, listen, you're the one that killed my son. It's like, no, that was my brother. And he's like, wait a minute. That like we're fundamentally different. I mean, that's why I'm Data and he's Lore. You get the whole thing? Like he did a thing. And it's like, nevertheless, you're the reason for my son's death. And it's like, well, what you did say was interesting, though. You said Data communicated with Lore, so we can talk to this thing. Interesting. She never says that to anything. Data never brings it up. But when that becomes like a major plot point, like it's just dropped on the floor.
Yeah, Lore does that. Lore's like, oh yeah, I think I can communicate with the Crystalline Entity. And he's like, boop, 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 did it. And then, like, after they beam Lore out into space, like, Riker and Picard run down to the cargo bay to talk with Data and Dr. Crusher and Wesley. And like, oh my god, what happened? We got here, like, right at the end, just like cops. And they're like, Geordi or Worf are on the bridge, and they're like, so, the Crystalline Entity f***ed off? Do we want to follow up on that? And Picard's like, what are our season 1 procedures for things? If we can't see it anymore, we don't care. That's right, Mr. LaForge. And then they just didn't do anything about it ever again.
Right. But I mean, if Lore could have figured it out like that trivially, it seems like Data would as well. And that whole, we'll get to it. That whole scene is frustrating, but... and
there's a record.
Yeah. The Riker thing, and then all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Right. Whatever Lore did, there had to be a record of it. So... Yeah, exactly. Like it's in the logs, always in the logs. But we know, here we see her competence. Like, she's like, hey, look, she's not just like a hateful old lady. She does have... So they're doing this kind of balance thing. Like, hey, Data for one scene, be a scientist for one scene, go back to hating Data. And this is good that we get, he totally schools her. And, she does do the whole, no, that couldn't work. And then Geordi's like, actually, boop, 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 boop. Oh, man, it does work. What do they take? Fucking high energy reaction? I'm sorry, gamma scans out of your paycheck, lady? Come on. Yeah. Do a gamma scan. All we do is Greek letter type scans. You got zeta scans, lady. Nothing better to do.
Yeah, you see all those lights behind that big panel over there? It just given us all the energy. Just all of it. Geordi gamma scanned himself just for grins 2 hours ago.
Yeah. Look, man, we got free healthcare. We got free gamma scans. This is the future. Just do it. Yeah. God.
Which is good. And this is kind of when she knows, she kind of recognizes herself that hey, listen, I just messed up because I was super mad. And then she kind of reins it in a little bit. She's like, sharp spike, a pattern. Damn. The new guy got it.
Yeah. I think they do a pretty good job of... I guess we got to talk about it. Where this is like a dude's revenge plot. This is the plot of Taken,
right? Yeah.
And this is the revenge you'd usually see a guy get, and she gets it, and she's doing it with science.
Yeah,
and it's a really great play on that theme. It's progressive in its own way.
I think the Ahab's good.
No, go ahead.
I think the Ahab scale is spot on, and it's great that because she's an older woman, it kind of reads that she has the experience and skills necessary to bring something of this magnitude down. We know that she's made it her life's work, but we don't really get how deep that hatred goes. But it's really great that they're letting kind of a woman kind of do this revenge kick. But and. So, that's kind of neat, but here we get her learning that her son... but here we learn that, her son is in Data's head, essentially. We don't know how big Data's head is, but it's really big, apparently.
Yeah, apparently, out of nowhere, suddenly Data has the collective memories of an entire colony of colonists.
Yeah, and all their journal entries, which... This really gets uncomfortable because, it really paints a picture. If you just ask yourself a question of, wait a minute, what do they do with these logs? Who gets to see them? It paints an uncomfortable picture about these logs. It's log 14, Ronnie spent extra time in the shower this morning.
Yeah, the way I figured, because it took the Crystalline Entity so long to eat this colony.
Yeah.
Maybe Lore was activated. He somehow found a way to communicate with the Crystalline Entity, which all these nerds can't do. And then he was disassembled because he was a dick, that afternoon. And he Dad's going to disassemble me. I'm going to call the Crystalline Entity to eat everybody. And so he gets disassembled. And then, the Crystalline Entity attacks and eats some people. And they all hide in the bunker. And the kids draw the cartoons. And then they're like, oh, shoot, we got to put all of our logs somewhere. What if we put them in Data? Data might survive. The prototype android, Mega Man X. And they do that, and then Data gets found, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
So maybe that's our timeline there?
Yeah. I guess. We kind of talked a little bit over Riker's pouting about losing his chance to do the sex thing.
Yeah.
But here she's kind of getting dressed down a little bit by Picard. It's hey, listen, I realize now that you're looking to kill this thing. And while Lieutenant Commander Worf enjoys firing solutions just as much as the next Klingon. We want to communicate with it. You mean like Lore did? Wait, what? Lore did? No.
I'm sorry, Dr. Ma. Did you beam onto the mirror universe? Where the military guy has to tell the science lady that we're not going to murder anything. Let's see if we can find a nice cloud of antiprotons or whatever to beam you through and get you back to your home universe.
Yeah. So this is, I like the kind of, the whale metaphor here because it kind of shows like, hey, look, this is kind of what we're talking about. And it might just be doing like a regular thing that it does. Maybe it doesn't matter.
It has a right to exist and to have its own little roaming boundaries and for us not to have colonies around it, you know?
Right. And that, to me, I think you could have had an episode where they're trying to find a peaceful way to exist with this thing without, like, losing colonies. And, the tension comes from, like, losing colonies over and over, and eventually they don't. And they figure something out, some way to coexist.
Here's Data learning how to end awkward conversations by saying, "Here is Wonderwall," and then just playing the guitar. Wonderwall.
Yeah, and playing the guitar is hard. I've tried it before, and tried it in the sense of just like strumming, and even that isn't pleasant. You have to kind of build up your calluses, and that's not cool.
I would know. I'm a drum guy.
That's fair.
Yeah, and I think
more racism before you go to bed, Doctor.
Just a little bit more. She's an interesting character. The series lives and dies on its guest stars. And, we initially see her, like, accusing Data of this, perhaps not because she fully believes it, but because she's trying to just hurt his feelings, or really anyone, over the death of her son.
And this is like the transition period where she kind of, like, ostensibly comes out of her hate, right? We think, like, oh, maybe she's not hating anymore. But for me, it was like she got wind that some relic of her son could be in Data, and it's like, oh man, I could utilize this android that doesn't read any emotions at all and get like some connection with my son again. And then you realize she's obsessed. Like she's obsessed about not like that she wasn't there with her son, I guess. Like, I don't know exactly what she's obsessed about, but it goes deeper than hatred, I think.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing, is that apparently she has spent her last few years dedicating her life to science because of the death of her son, and she could have made another one at this point, and it'd be about 16. But
I mean,
she was apparently a scientist before that, and her being a scientist was the reason she couldn't be with her son.
Yeah.
And so it's like she was already a scientist. So it feels like there's less transformation there.
Yeah.
But whatever. It feels like I'm nitpicking on that.
I mean, yeah, she, in some ways, like, she has, like, some depth, but in other ways, she's still kind of a shallow character. But, I mean, maybe that's what hate does to you. Hate is just kind of like that thing that just drives you towards one thing and you don't care about anything else.
I mean, I would say, getting back to the progressive argument from earlier, that, she does have this regret about, like, pursuing her career over her family, which doesn't really happen to dudes so much.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because it's a real choice for a woman.
Right. And it shouldn't be. It's still a societal expectation. But I do like that she's still empowered.
Right.
To get that revenge and to protect her family and to avenge her family. And we also aren't belabored in this episode with, like, who the dad is or any of that garbage.
Yeah.
Like there's a Mr. Marr at home who just, like, I don't know, he's a taste tester for freaking Capri Suns or something. And he's like, oh, that's my wife. She loves the rocks and space, and son's dead, super bad.
Right.
And he's like, I keep trying to convince. We have, like, 3 more kids, actually. We have 3 kids at home.
She doesn't seem to acknowledge them. I don't understand. I mean, she's carried them the term, but she just, after that, she goes off and does science again. We
got also Remy 2, and Remy 3 the Revenge. She still wants to find that crystalline entity, though.
This whole thing passes the, like, at first we didn't think we'd get someone who'd pass the Bechdel test, but I mean, this whole character does, right? She has many lines where she's like, I'm going to kill this entity.
I mean, the Bechdel test requires her
there you
to have a conversation with another woman that is not about a man.
I thought it was just conversations in general. You're right. My bad.
If there was 2 seconds where she was in an elevator with Dr. Crusher and went, God, that crystalline entity, we'd be good. But we're not.
Yeah.
So, and here we have a scene where the crystalline entity has found one of those shitty freighters that's all over Star Trek, and it's just murdering it. Just cracking it open like a cold one.
Yeah. Have you ever seen one of those lobsters that just like fire one of their hands at like a clam to break the hard shell and just like lick it out?
Yeah.
That's what the crystalline entity is, and just cracking that shell wide open, just sucking all those cuttlefish out.
I feel like if they can phaser this little guy up or torpedo this guy up, if he cracks open a starship and all the antimatter goes boom, I feel like it would learn not to eat that.
Yeah, maybe so. Do all ships are all ships like powered by antimatter?
That's a really good question. I think not.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't exactly know.
Yeah.
We only know like the big Federation starships are. So I couldn't say.
And so this is kind of weird. So at the very beginning, we had this kind of exchange between Picard and Troy. We don't really see Troy anymore. But about like, hey, I need to make sure she keeps her objectivity. And already, he's had to dress her down about like wanting to kill a thing. And he should have known that her objectivity is compromised. It seems like she would have someone, I don't know, who at least on paper can read emotions to make sure she doesn't do anything weird.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a very conspicuous reason why she's Starfleet's foremost expert on this. That someone at, not Starfleet, the Federation, and someone in the Federation should have said, we should give her an assistant with like a stun baton.
No.
Because obviously her reasoning behind this is very personal and could easily be directed towards vengeance. And as Troy said, you don't have to be an empath or a counselor to see that, although she's both and doesn't seem to do anything about it. So
yeah. Well, maybe like counseling in Starfleet is really just like going to the chain of command. It's like, hey, that dude's in trouble. Okay. That's it. Just we'll decide to do something about it or not. This freaking scene right here. So apparently they're going to send like, I don't know, a bucket of sand to the family as her personal effects. And he's like, hey, Will, you want to write a letter? He's like, oh, I'd very much like that. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Carmen, I don't know her last name. I like Carmen very, very much, and I really, really, really wanted to have sex with her, but the crystalline entity killed her. Sorry for your loss.
Yeah, Riker's like, can I has a story, please? And Picard's like, no. Yeah. May I have character development, please, sir? No. Write a letter, Will.
Yeah, like he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be a nerd. Like he's supposed to be right. Like he's Picard's number one. He's supposed to be around that same level as far as Starfleet goes. But why would Picard, who, at every turn is like, no, we have the sanctity of life. We need to communicate with it, nonviolence. Keep some dude around that's like, anytime he doesn't get his dick wet, he's like, I just want to kill something.
I mean, I think it's fair to remember the human emotional dimension of these things. To say, hey, look, it is a threat. This thing could kill people because apparently we don't do a damn thing to defend our colonists. So it's like super dangerous.
I mean,
like, what if we defended our colonists?
But I mean, the thing is that, people can die, but people are always dying all the time. If only if your knowledge of that fact makes you somehow complicit, then you'll always be complicit. Like you'll always be on the sidelines not doing something. Not saying that you shouldn't value life, but you need to put things in perspective. Do what you can. Enjoy the time you have. That sort of thing.
Yeah. And so there's supposed to be some tension there. Should we kill it? Should we not kill it?
Yeah.
And I don't think we make a good should we kill it argument. Again, that's because I already know that we can communicate with this thing.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, well, we can do something. Maybe Galactus could try eating planets without life on them. Try it.
Exactly.
He might like it.
Yeah. Yeah, we could just like pump out little stars that it could eat if all it wants is energy or something. But so this is interesting. Like this is like her kind of interfacing with like the journal that is Data. I'm really kind of surprised. Like so she's nice to him. She's like not being mean. And so this is where we're about to get a very funny face from Data because he just menaced the girlfriend, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I never knew. You probably wouldn't tell her mom thing." He's like, "Oh yeah, let's continue this conversation." And so he's like, yeah, he really enjoyed, her kindness, her gentleness, her physical attributes. He's like, oh, he's like, oops, I didn't mean to insinuate that your son was having sex. I'm sorry. Please don't get mad.
It would be great if he just started reading like dirty text messages, and he's like, yeah, baby, you thick. And he's like, oh, there's an image attached to this text message. And he picks up his paintbrush. Please allow me to draw it for you. James like, no, it's fine. It's fine. My son's becoming a man.
He's like, would you like me to draw your son's dick pic? So here's the thing. Like, that's where this gets really uncomfortable is that, not Picard, Starfleet is always keeping logs of everything. And, like, people will talk about, like, when people talk about, like, privacy, they're like, oh, well, privacy... it's not important. Privacy isn't important because I'm a good guy. I don't do any bad things, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But that isn't the issue. It's how people empowered decide to use their ability to invade your privacy. If they decide, like, oh, well, guess what? Like, you have hair on your head. That means, like, you're an enemy of us. And so we recognize that you shave your head every morning. Then, bam, we'll throw you in the gulag. Like, that's not... and no one can predict the future. And so that's why privacy is important.
Yeah.
But there's no privacy here.
I mean, at the very least, the lack of privacy in Starfleet seems fairly egalitarian.
Right.
Like, anybody could bring up Picard's, playlist from, like, 10:30 to midnight and be like, hey, everybody, look at what Picard's watching at night when he's alone. That never happens. But, it's at least presumed to be egalitarian to its defense, but no, it bad.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen there are some people in Starfleet who abuse their authority. I mean, like 2 episodes ago or something like that, or episode ago.
Yeah.
And so we know that not everyone in Starfleet is pure and good.
Right.
But I mean, at the very least, anytime the logs get screen time, there's ostensibly some utility to further the plot along in a positive way, and they're not used to like, oh, cool, we read this new thought, and he had a negative thought one time, so let's throw him in jail.
Yeah, like that sort of openness can only happen in a truly just society.
Right.
And we don't have one of those.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
People are still ignorant and dicks.
There are 2 things that infuriate me about what's about to happen. One, we'll get to that one because that's the pretty big one. But the more subtle event is that there are a lot of things, like all of these people are supposed to be very capable and understanding and collaborative. When they get into the central conflict, everyone starts asking for permission to do stuff. And I'm like, you don't need permission. Do the thing you know is right. Like, why are we at... Geordi asked, it's like, do you want me to try to override? Yes, Geordi, override the thing. Jeez.
I'm actually upset that they're like, emit the beam. And like, okay, we're emitting the beam. Like, space is big, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a beam, not a wave, not a pulse, not a field. It's a beam.
Yeah.
So if it's there... And he points at like one spot on the view screen. If it's there, it's going to find it. But whatever it works, it lures it in.
Yeah.
It's like the science is getting real soft as we get further into this series.
Right. And this was like just trivial. Like it was trivial the way they shattered this thing. And, but I mean, that's not really that bothers me. But the thing that really bothered me the most is that there are a few things that are about to come up that are problematic, and nobody.
A whole cavalcade of things. As this episode suddenly gets like really, really quick. Dr. Marsh suddenly gets like a t-shirt cannon that only shoots red flags, and everyone else is just completely stunned. I mean, It is pretty funny because I imagine her like in the graviton pulse to the crystalline entity saying, I'm not a wealthy woman. I live in a currency-less society, but I do have a degree in space geology, and I will find you, and I will emit a graviton pulse at a resonant frequency until you shatter. Because, like, that's all this is. It's just Taken, but with science, which is good. It's an improvement on Taken.
Maybe that's what she did. Maybe she, like, took all the communications between the Crystalline Entity lore, figured out that she can talk to it, and that's what she's telling. It's like, hey, listen, come closer. There's free food. I have a particular set of skills.
Yeah. But yeah, like there's so many like red flags here, right? And everyone's like, "Oh, what's happening?"
Everyone becomes useless, and it's so frustrating because they're supposed to be capable of doing this kind of stuff, and they're like, "Get her away!" Like no one does anything.
It would be great if Dr. Marr is like, "You guys think I was already a brilliant scientist? You think I spent the last 16 years studying space crystals?" She pulls out a sword. She's like, "I was studying the blade." And she goes like full Kill Bill on the bridge of the Enterprise. And they're just like, "Oh God, she has a knife."
Yeah.
And Worf is too erect to do anything. And like, no one can get to the control panel to stop the graviton pulse.
Where has this woman been all my life?
He's just behind the console seething like, ah.
See, look, he's relying on his authority. Like, that's an order. Like, of course she's not going to follow that order. What world do you come from? And Data doesn't shut down the transmission until he's told to. And then Geordi's like, I could try to do this. Should I? Yes, Jordan. Look,
it's so
maybe
weird.
I can do this. Like, look, he's gonna I'm gonna try to shut it down from here. Meanwhile, she's still at a terminal, could be doing any number of countermeasures.
Worf is just standing there waiting for anything to happen.
He's like, hey, look, I can override the thing, but it's gonna take some time. Like, don't tell us about it, just do it. Oh man, that whole thing frustrated me because at so many levels did it feel like it was preventable and just wasn't. Just nothing.
Yeah. Like, don't look at her, Riker.
Yeah.
You're on her side.
Riker's just like, oh my God. She killed it. Oh, it was so pretty. Oh, I'm sorry, hug me, please. I'm so vulnerable.
Like, I get it, like, we get it. Like, there are just some details with the execution.
Yeah, and that I guess happens. This is where we get, like, full-on old lady creepy. Because, like, she starts, like, she's kind of, like, fondling him somewhat, like, kind of, like, touching him. And then they, as they walk off camera. And then here, he's like, hey, look, I'll just stay here. I mean, I can not breathe if you want. You can keep this air or anything. And she kind of gets into this wistful mode where she's like, oh, Remy, I did it for you. And he's like,
It's a satisfying conclusion. Because usually we have, like, a slightly more moral argument for, like, revenge. Like, oh, it only perpetuates the cycle. Or, oh, it doesn't make anyone better. It doesn't bring people back from the dead. And Data's like, nah, straight up, that's stupid. You suck. The person you were avenging thinks you suck.
Yeah. And, like, he just straight up, like, destroys this woman.
He does.
He's like, oh, Remy, I did it for you. It's like, firstly, I'm not Remy, and his journals don't have anything indicating that he would have enjoyed you killing a benign creature.
Like, Data's great, and there's some really good Data episodes. And I think the most satisfying thing about many of them is that cold as ice Data outro.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the f***ing coldest.
Oh, yeah, dude. And she's just like, he's just giving her a quick kick to the gut. Reminding us like, hey, listen, I'm not Remy, and everything that I know about him, which is a lot because, Starfleet logs tells me he'd be sad right now because you're not a scientist anymore. I'm sorry for you. Data out. He just drops the mic. Bam.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I have to do a really boring maintenance thing on the other side of the ship.
Yeah, I mean, Starfleet would. It's really just run together by glue and tape. If I die, this whole thing falls apart.
I don't know. I could pencil you in at like 7:13, 7:31, and then 8:14 to do whatever it is you're doing right now. Again, bye. He's like on the to-do list.
Yeah.
Anyway, final thoughts, Silicon Avatar.
My final thoughts had to do, like I kind of mentioned it a little bit, but at the very beginning, I was hopeful that I would have kind of an existential dread sort of storyline. And, like some of my bias might have colored this episode, but it just kind of goes downhill from like the initial kind of colony episode. We get a whole bunch of like weird Riker scenes that don't line up. He's mad for no real reason. We get the hating Data, and I mean, you pointing out that she was much like Captain Ahab kind of redeemed it somewhat, I think.
For the record, that's not any special insight. That's just something Star Trek does here and in Star Trek 2 and then in other Star Trek movies.
Yeah. So. And I didn't think about that, but, having like a female Ahab, it is kind of somewhat of a progressive story.
Wait. Sorry. There's a tweet that says, conservatives, the world should be ruled by 12 oligarchs, and it says liberals, and it has like the clap emoji, and it goes, half of those oligarchs should be women. It's very progressive. It's very progressive in that version.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but I still, just some of the problems, like just the lack of, like everyone, like, it feels like the whole last scene, well, not the scene with like Data and the Doctor, but the scene before that, like almost everyone on the bridge has like forgotten power syndrome.
Yeah.
And there's so many things they could have done and didn't. And like Data could have said, oh yeah, we can totally communicate it, because early on in this episode, the Doctor said that Lore communicated with it, therefore I should be able to communicate it. But the transitive power of being a Doctor Sung robot. One moment, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, so it was hard for me to get over that kind of stuff. But so that's kind of where I'm at with this episode.
All right. Well, next week is going to be Disaster.
All right. So in this card, we get Data. He's looking either nonplussed or all of his muscles are locked up. I'm assuming the latter, but it could be the former. Like, yeah, who knows? And
they got that one lightning effect.
He is in some sort of, I don't know if he's in a cargo bay. He's not in the bridge. He's not in a room, but he's in kind of what I would say is like a confined space of some kind. And this is what we get from Netflix by way of summary. When the Enterprise's systems are disrupted after hitting a quantum filament, Troy is left in command while Captain Picard is stuck in the turbolift. So Data isn't Troy, so I'm a little confused. Maybe he's getting hit. Maybe the quantum filament is just getting wrecked by electricity. Maybe that's code for getting wrecked by electricity. I don't know.
I mean, it's called Disaster. So it's not like Picard is just in a turbo lift and like it's stuck and nobody can find him.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening in this one.
It'll be interesting.
We'll see it next week. And until then, remember Rand. I'll make this short because no one likes credits. Star Trek is property of CBS Television Studios and Paramount Pictures. We are watching Star Trek on Netflix. We are talking over Discord. And we are recording and editing on Audacity. The Beige and the Bold is hosted on Anchor and can be found on most podcasting platforms. I would also like to thank our senior officer Patreons for supporting The Beige and the Bold. They also make video editions of this podcast and remasters of old episodes possible. So thank you to Tracker by Moonlight and Miss Jess. If you have any questions or concerns about the show, please contact me at vanvelding@gmail.com or on Twitter @vanvelding. Thank you, and remember Rand.